Over 30 years, Frank Delgado paid a bank $190,000. Not toward a house, not toward a car he still drives, not toward anything he owns or ever owned. He paid it in interest. It was, quite literally, rent. The rent you pay on borrowed money. $190,000, enough to have bought a house outright in cash, handed over a little at a time, month after month, for 30 years. And Frank has nothing to show for a single cent of it. He's 58 now. He still works full-time, and he owes more money today than he did at 25. Frank wasn't reckless. There was no gambling, no addiction, no wild spending sprees. Frank drowned doing the most ordinary thing in America, the thing you're very likely doing right now and calling normal. And here's what should stop you cold. Frank never once saw it happening, because the trap he fell into was specifically designed so that, from the inside, it feels exactly like being responsible. So let me take you back to the very first card, the one that felt like a lifeline, and show you the exact moment Frank quietly hired the bank a salary he'd be paying for the rest of his life. It's 1996. Frank is 28, living outside Phoenix, Arizona, married, with a baby on the way, and a decent job that covers the bills, as long as nothing goes wrong. Then something goes wrong. The transmission on the truck. $1,400 right before Christmas, money Frank does not have. And there in his wallet is the answer. A credit card, brand new, with a limit that feels like a small miracle. So he uses it. Of course he uses it. What's the alternative? And it works. The truck gets fixed, Christmas happens. Frank feels, honestly, a little relieved, a little grateful. The bill comes in January, $1,400 owed, and down at the bottom, in small, friendly print, a minimum payment, $35. And Frank feels that relief again. $35? He can do $35. So he pays it, and he checks the box, and he moves on with his life feeling like a man who's handling his responsibilities. And that right there is the trap closing. Because the minimum payment is not designed to get you out of debt. It is engineered precisely to feel like relief while keeping you exactly where you are. Of Frank's $35, most of it went to interest. Almost none of it touched what he actually owed. He wasn't paying off the debt, he was paying rent on it. And he'd just agreed, without knowing it, to keep paying that rent for years. Because here's the thing about carrying a balance. Life keeps happening. Another rough month, a medical bill, a second kid, a water heater. A card gets close to its limit, so a second card shows up to help. And it does help, for a while, the way a bigger bucket helps a sinking boat. Frank was never wild with it. A dinner here, a birthday there, school clothes, normal life, quietly financed. And every month, he made his payments, like a responsible man. Every month he felt like he was handling it, but underneath, something merciless was happening, and Frank couldn't feel it. The interest was compounding, not on what he bought, on what he owed. Interest charged on last month's interest, then interest on that, growing on itself in the dark, the exact same silent force that builds fortunes, running in reverse, tearing his apart. By his 40s, a real chunk of every single paycheck Frank earned didn't go to Frank at all. It went to the bank. He was working, clocking in, giving his hours, his back, his years, and a piece of every hour went to pay interest on a dinner he ate a decade ago, a vacation he could barely remember, a couch that was already sitting in a landfill. He was paying, with today's labor, for a past that was already gone. And the balance? The balance barely moved. He wasn't climbing out. He was running, full speed, just to stay in exactly the same place. Now let me show you the number that should hurt, because this is the part Frank never understood until it was far too late. Compound interest is the most powerful force in all of money. You've probably heard that, but nobody tells you the second half of the sentence. It is the most powerful force whether it's working for you or against you. It does not care which. It is just as ruthless building someone's fortune as it is destroying one. For 30 years, Frank had that force pointed directly at his own chest. That $190,000 he paid in interest? That was compound interest, working for the bank with Frank's money. But here's the second loss, the one that truly stings. If Frank had taken even the modest amount he threw at interest each month and instead invested it, put that same force to work for him, he wouldn't have paid out $190,000. he'd have built close to $500,000. So the real cost of Frank's debt was never just the interest. It was the fortune that same money would have become, pointed the other way. He didn't lose $190,000. He lost that plus everything it could have grown into. He spent 30 years feeding the most powerful force in finance, and he pointed it at himself. The years wore Frank down the way that kind of pressure always does. Quietly, constantly. It was no dramatic bankruptcy, no single rock bottom, just a slow, grinding exhaustion, the low hum of always owing, always behind, always making payments that never seemed to shrink anything. The stress sat in his chest through his 50s. It sat between him and his wife at the kitchen table. It was the reason the vacation stopped, the reason retirement was a word other people used. And one evening, 58 years old, in the relentless Arizona heat, Frank sat at that same kitchen table and finally added it all up. 3 decades of full-time work, and he owed more than he had at 25. He'd earned a good living, an honest living, and a second, invisible person had been quietly collecting a full-time salary off his labor the entire time. The bank. He'd been working 2 jobs his whole life. He'd just only ever been paid for one of them. Now, here's what I promised you. Here's why this should keep you up tonight. Because you're carrying a balance right now, and part of you has already made peace with it. Everyone has debt. It's normal. You make your payments. You're handling it. That exact thought, that quiet, comfortable, "it's fine," is the same thought that ran through Frank's head every single month for 30 years while the most powerful force in finance quietly emptied his life. Every dollar you owe on that card is a tiny worker you hired, and that worker doesn't work for you. It works for the bank, 24 hours a day, every day, forever, making them richer and you poorer. And it never sleeps, never takes a day off, never stops, until the day you finally fire it by paying it off. There is no neutral setting on compound interest. It is either the greatest wealth-building force you will ever have on your side or the heaviest anchor you will ever carry. Every month, with every balance, you are choosing which. Frank chose, without ever realizing he was choosing, for 30 years. And Frank didn't have a different brain than you. He just had 30 years to show you where "it's fine, everyone has debt" actually leads. Frank Delgado spent his whole life making payments on a life he'd already used up. Buried under interest on dinners long digested, trips long forgotten, things long thrown away. He worked 30 years and handed a fortune to a bank for absolutely nothing he could hold. Compound interest never sleeps. That's the whole truth of it. The only question you ever actually get to answer is whose side it's working on. Point it at your future and it will quietly build you a fortune while you live your life. Point it at your past, and it will spend your whole life building someone else's. Fire the worker you hired for the bank, then hire one for yourself. Subscribe, because there are far more of these than you would ever believe, and the next one might be the one sitting in your wallet right now.